And I didn't get an agenda for today's meeting. Okay, I wasn't sure, and that's why I was panicking yesterday, sending you all frantic messages. And I'm happy to help. I was not in total attendance at the last meeting, so no, I don't, but I can certainly see if I can find those. Yes. Perfect. How are you, sir? I was going to bring them around. But since you are here, Piagentini, now I'm not going to tell him that you don't remember his name. It'll break his heart. You mind taking him? Okay. Team effort. Okay. He's got his.
Hey, Regan, that's perfect. Thank you.
How do you do?
I suppose I can. Let me grab a pen, please. That would be fabulous, if you don't mind. And then the next time, I'll be more
Okay, call to order the October 14th meeting. We are going to take a roll call today because I anticipate that we might vote on a contract. So I guess we'll start off with taking roll.
Mary Ann Butler.
Here.
David James.
Here.
Anthony Piagentini. Ja'Cory Arthur.
Here.
Julie Rocky Adams. Mike Nemus.
Present.
Gerald Neal. Ken Fleming.
Present.
Pamela Stevenson.
Present.
Bonnie Jung.
Present.
Sean, what is your last name, sir? Is he here?
Spot. He's not here.
He's not here, very good. Earl Jones. Scott Schoenberger.
Present.
And Shelby Somerville.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 present and a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum to conduct business. We will, just to let everybody know the order in which we're going to proceed today, we're going to hear from Mayor Abramson some remarks about the history of merger and how it didn't pass and how it passed and what his understanding of that is. And then we're going to hear from Mr. Coombs, Mr. Paul Coombs, and his team, which we've asked to come today. Thank you for being here today. And then we very well may vote on a contract. There is a document that should have been in your area when you sat down to talk about the general scope, which I think Mr. Coombs will go into, and so will Mr. President James and Representative Fleming. And then I will remind everybody to get your committee preferences in because we intend to appoint everyone to a committee as we discussed last meeting. The co-chairman and I, and we'll announce that next month. So those are the three things we'll take up today, and then we'll open it after that. After that, we'll open it to the floor. I want to remind everyone when they speak, and this includes you, Mayor, because of the transcript, to say your name before you start speaking. But everybody knows who you are, obviously, but just make sure that the transcriber, which is automatic, doesn't. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Jerry Abramson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jerry Abramson, and I have with me Tina Heverin to my right. Tina has 40 years of local government experience. She was counsel to the county judge at one time. She was counsel to the 82 and 83 committees that developed merger votes. She was counsel to me in the new city once the city and county merged. She was law director in the old city. She was law director and then ultimately became deputy mayor in the new city. So Tina has, if there are questions that really focus on some of the legalities or how we did certain things, Tina was there involved both at the county side at the beginning and then the new city side afterwards. Let me see if I can walk us all quickly through the history of what happened back in the day. You know, in the 1960s, there was a very aggressive movement in some cities to consolidate their city and county. Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Nashville looked at it. Louisville was talking about merging back in 1947 for the first time. And then we ultimately voted on it in 56, and we voted on it again in 82, and we voted on it again in 83. 82, 83, it was about a 1,400 vote loss in 82, and everybody said, let's put it back on the ballot. We think we can get it done, and in 83, it went from a 1,400 or 1,200 vote separation to a 2,500 vote separation. It's going in the wrong way, so that was the end of the votes that we had had. So 56 it lost, 82 it lost, 83 it lost. Now, in the year 2000, when we began looking at doing it again, let me just frame up for you the city versus the county. The city was about 60 square miles in its size. The county was about 386 square miles, 60 of which was the old city. The structure of government, we had a mayor, a strong mayor form of government. We had 12 aldermen. Each one represented a ward in the city of Louisville. In the county of Jefferson, there was a county judge, and there were 3 county commissioners. And basically, they were pie-shaped. If you started from the county courthouse and you went east, that was A, and you went in the middle of the community, it was B, and then if you went to the west of the community, it was C. The population in the old city in the year 2000 was about 260,000. The population in the community at large, the Louisville, Jefferson County in large, was about 700,000. We had an income level, the average income level inside the city was $28,000. The average income level outside the city was about $39,500. In terms of minorities, the African-American community was about 30% inside the city, and the countywide, it was about 19%. In terms of, at that time, we had about 90-plus cities in Jefferson County. I think we have about 80-plus now. At that time, we had about 21 fire districts, and I think we're down to about 8 or 9 today. The arguments that were brought up for merger at that time was the focus on the ineffective delivery of service. And to give you a perfect example, if you know Hikes Point, there's the McMahon Shopping Center out there. The middle of the parking lot of the McMahon Shopping Center was the dividing line between the old city and the old county. So if you had an accident in a car in the parking lot and you called 911, they would say, city or county? And you would say, I don't really know. And they would say, well, are you on the east side of the parking lot or the west side? And they say, well, it's nighttime. I'm not sure where the sun is setting. I mean, it was those kinds of inefficient situations. Or the other one that always came up was there would be a road that the city of Louisville would pave, and we would bring out our equipment and we would pave the road to this imaginary border where we hit the county, and then we would shut down our equipment, take it all back, call the county, say, it's up to you. They'd show up with their equipment, and they would finish the road out into the suburban area. So inefficiency was a real issue. Ineffectiveness, inefficiency. Duplicative services. The county had as its responsibility social services. The city had an awful lot of people who needed social services. And so city government with the alderman and the mayor felt we needed a social service department. And we found, I could go through several of those kinds of situations where there were duplicative departments doing the same thing, creating I think, confusion. And then there was a lack of unified leadership. If I can take you back to that period around 2000, twice we had potential NBA teams looking at Louisville. And twice, in both situations, the city was on one side of being for an NBA team, the county was on the other side being for or against an NBA team. And each time, in talking with the owners of the team that were looking to relocate, one went to New Orleans, one went, I think, to Charlotte, they just simply said, the community gets their act together, let us know, we'll come back and look. But until then, you guys, you're not sure what's going on. And there was a lack of accountability in city and county government. Everything that went wrong as mayor, I blamed it on the county judge. And everything that went wrong as county judge, he blamed it on me, or she blamed it on me. And so nobody knew who was screwing up because everybody was pointing the finger across 6th Street back and forth as to what was the real deal. And then lack of accountability also, especially in the city and also in the county. The elections were held, follow me on this, if you were the first ward alderman of the city, 12 aldermen, in the primary election, you ran in the first ward. In the general election, you ran citywide. So what does that mean? Well, I'll give you a perfect example. There was a fellow in the first ward of the city of Louisville, which is basically where I live in Crescent Hill. His name was Bill Stansberry. He was a Democrat. He ran against a Republican for first ward alderman by the name of John Yarmouth. We've heard that name. John Yarmouth won the first ward popular vote, but lost citywide in the general election. So Yarmouth won the primary, only people in the first ward voted. Stansberry won the primary, only people in the first ward voted. But when it came time to vote in the general, you had to run citywide. So every person in the city got to vote for 12 aldermen, not just their own. So that was a real problem in terms of, and the same thing was in A district, B district, and C district. In the old county days, they ran in the primary, with their people that lived in A district, but in the general election, A, B, and C voted for A. And B, A, C voted for B. So you had people that were winning elections that their own neighborhood didn't want to be their representative. So all that was going on. Okay, so why did it fail? Why did it fail in 56, 82, and 83? Well, we decided that it failed because, number one, it was too specific. A couple of the times it said do away with all the suburban cities. Well, that wasn't going to make it. It was too specific. The second one was suburban mayors were very nervous about just exactly what those communities, how they would be treated. They were concerned. Labor unions. At the time, the city of Louisville had labor unions, and the county of Jefferson did not. That was ultimately changed prior to the 2000 election, but that was an issue as to why the 56, 82, and 83 failed. Everybody was worried about taxes. If they merge, the tax is going to go up. So people were voting in that regard. Race issue, there were 30% African Americans inside the city. There was 19% community-wide. That came into play. And Democrat versus Republican, because there were more Republicans outside the city than inside the city. And the concern was which political party was going to get the benefit if, in fact, there was a merger. So when we lost in 83, I said 56, 82, 83, the state legislature, led by a lot of folks out in southwest Jefferson County, got the right for our community to vote for merger ever again taken away from us. So a statute was passed saying, city and county of Jefferson, you can never vote on a merger of city and county government. So that was right after our final loss in 83. In 86, we got a new mayor, that was me, and we got a new county judge. And all of a sudden, people were saying, well, we need to do something. So we began, the county judge and I, met 20 times, Tina was there representing the county at the time, about what we could do that would be a hybrid. What could we pass if the fiscal court, which was the county government, and the Board of Aldermen, which was the city government, could vote on it? What could we do to sort of bring peace to the valley and let everybody relax a little bit? Well, they came after 20 meetings, we came up with what we called the Louisville-Jefferson County Compact. It had a real long name, and we got a thesaurus out and found what could you call something, and we decided instead of calling it an agreement, we called it the Compact. And the compact, which was passed by fiscal court in the county, passed by the Board of Aldermen, and passed by the legislature to give us the opportunity, gave us the chance to, one, share economic development growth. You know, there was a time where a decision maker would get off an airplane, and I, as mayor, would meet them and say, welcome to Louisville. Please locate inside the 60 square miles called Louisville, because we get your occupation tax. And the county judge would say, welcome to Jefferson County. Please locate outside the 60 square miles because we get your occupation tax. It was the same occupation tax for the city of the county. And a lot of times the decision maker would say, thank you very much, call me when you got your act together. Well, so what we decided in the compact was we would pool our resources. We would have one economic development office. We would share taxes when we worked a whole formula out, and provide an opportunity where when a potential decision maker for a new business came to Louisville, we could lay out an array of options. You want to be downtown? We got a downtown. You want to be in the suburbs? We got a suburbs. You want to be in an industrial park? We got industrial parks. You know, please make a selection that's appropriate for you. That was number one. The second thing we did was we froze annexation. Years back, someone in this room, as an alderman, proposed to annex everything that wasn't already a part of the city of Louisville, but had a connection to the city of Louisville. You had to physically have geography adjacent to where the city of Louisville was. And you can imagine when that annexation was proposed for the rest of the county and the suburban cities went bonkers. And what we decided in this compact was we would set that aside. We would stop all the litigation. We would put it up on the shelf for 12 years. And we would take a deep breath since we'd lost in 82 for merger, 83 for merger. The compact, going to share economic development. we're going to stop annexing. And then ultimately, we had a whole bunch of agencies that were called city-county agencies, like the zoo, or the Board of Health, or the library, or the air pollution control, or DES. We had all these agencies, and what they would do is they would whipsaw the county and the city during budget time. They'd come to us and say, well, the county gave us X number of dollars, so you got to match it 50-50. Or they'd come to the county and say, well, the city's going to give us X dollars for the Department of Emergency Services or for the air pollution control, and you got to do it. So nobody was watching these organizations, and they had significant budgets. So we said, let's divide them up. City, you take a group of them. The county, you take a group of them. You fund them 100%. So the city took on, for example, human relations. So we funded it 100%. And we took on the zoo, and we funded it 100%. And the county took on air pollution control and things, parks. So we developed an approach that would not raise the cost to either side, but at least give us management authority to watch their budgets. And that was basically the game plan. Economic development, share the taxes of new business, stop the annexation, and divide up these organizations that were sort of independent contractors out there, and let's put them under some government responsibility that will take time to review. That was passed and was renewed in 1998 for another 10 years. So we did it for 12 years and renewed it in 1998. But the problem was that we still had the same issues. We had two CEOs of this community. You know, nobody knew who was speaking for the community. We had, especially when we went to Frankfurt, you know, the county was saying this, the city was saying this, and nobody really knew what the community wanted. And we also had staff fighting among themselves all the time, as you would imagine when you have two CEOs. The mayor's staff was trying to one-up the county judge's staff, the county judge's staff. Who speaks first at the ribbon cutting? Who gets the biggest shovel after the groundbreaking? I mean, it was just a waste of time and energy. So, long and short of it was, the compact created an opportunity, but we still had lots and lots of problems. 1998, community said, let's try it again. So this time, Tina says to me, to go to Frankfurt and to ultimately get them to give us the right to vote, we need to get all the state legislators from Louisville and Jefferson County, all the state senators from Louisville and Jefferson County, all the county officials, that's the county clerk, the county, you name it, we had them, all the city officials, and I think we had 10 or 12 suburban mayors on this task force to develop what we wanted for the future of our hometown. And we met, you know, were we going to create a strong mayor form of government, a weak mayor form of government? Were we going to have a city manager? How many districts were we going to have? Who was going to pick the design of the districts? How many people should be in each district? So we went through all of those discussions. We had some pretty strong arguments, as you would expect. And ultimately, we came out with a game plan that we put on the ballot, thanks to the legislature then giving us the right to have the opportunity to vote. First thing we said is the only merger that was going to occur was the two executive branches and the two legislative branches. So there would the city of Louisville mayor and the county of Jefferson judge would merge, and the board of aldermen and the legislative fiscal court county commissioners would merge. Now, what about EMS? What about the police department? What about all these other things? And the answer was, we're going to put together 26, we didn't know at that time, but we're going to have a metro council, which ultimately turned out to be 26. They're going to live in their neighborhood where the people vote for them or against them, and they'll decide, once they come in together, should we merge finance? Should we merge EMS? Should we merge police, etc.? So that's the first thing we decided. The second thing we decided was we wanted a strong mayor form of government, and we wanted to have as many districts as we could that would be fashioned. You remember I told you there were 3 county commissioners. Each one represented like 250,000 people. They had 12 aldermen. Each one represented about 45,000 people, give or take. So we thought the 45,000, give or take, was a right number. And so We then divided that by 750,000, or how many there was in Jefferson County, and that gave us 26 council members. Then there was a charge that said no tax change whatsoever. You pay your county tax if you live in the county right now. It's now going to be called the Metro tax, and it will go for the same things it went for before. The old county police, the old county EMS, corrections, social services, that's what it went for, that's what it'll go for. There was no service change whatsoever. You want more services, you pay more taxes. You know, the first month I came in as the new mayor of the new city, I got calls from people all over the suburban area saying, well, we're a part of Louisville now, so when are you going to pick our garbage up? So we'll pick it up whenever you want to pick it up. Just get your people to vote for a taxing district and pay for the tax and pay more tax, and we'll be more than happy to pick up your garbage. So we had a lot of people that were confused, and we had to go back through that often. We left all 90 cities, I think there's only 80 some odd now, but we left all 90 cities alone and literally wrote in that said, you can't go out of business unless you want to go out of business. The Metro Council can't put a city out of business. If the city comes in, St. Matthews walks in and says, we want to go out of business, then the Metro Council can vote. And the same thing with the fire districts. People love their fire departments. We left them alone. You had the urban fire department, and you had at that time about 21 fire districts, which I think have consolidated now into about 8 or 9. How do we design the districts, the 26 districts? Well, we went to the University of Louisville, and we asked the head of the geography department, a guy named Dakin, may he rest in peace, and his graduate students in geography, to design this district with several things in mind. One, we wanted to be sure that we could feel comfortable minorities would be represented among the 26 in the percentages that they were, in fact, existed in the community. So we wanted the council to reflect what, in fact, the community makeup was. We also wanted suburban cities to be kept together as best they could so that you wouldn't be dividing up a city with, you know, most of our cities are 8 or 10 or 15 blocks. J-Town probably got 2, maybe 3 council members, but we wanted them to be as closely, we wanted them to be connected and not divided. And then what happened was the geography students, created a draft, put it out. We had public hearings. People said, we should go 3 more blocks this way. We think you missed it on this one. And they made changes, and they made changes. And finally, the consensus was, here's the 26 districts, and here's the geography that they represent. The only, and again, the only merger that was occurring was the city of Louisville and Jefferson County. All the suburban cities continued. And also there was language in it that said that, you know, if you want a special taxing district in your area, you can do that if you're so inclined. I'll give you a perfect example of how we tried to do that. In the first year or so I was mayor, you know, there was a suburban neighborhood out in Pleasure Ridge Park that had garbage pickup every day because they were in the unincorporated area of the community. And one house had a contract with XYZ, and the next house had waste management, and the next house had whatever. And by the time it was over, every day of the week, there was a garbage can out on the street. So we went to them under the statute that said, you know, you can set up a taxing district if you want. And we said, set up this district. We'll put the contract out for bid. You'll get 1 hauler. It'll be cheaper, we think, because right now you got 5. If one company's going to do it all, we think you'll be much, much cheaper. And you'll only have garbage on the street 1 day a week. And they said, thank you very much for your thoughts, Mayor. We appreciate your efforts, but we're happy just the way we are. So they didn't take advantage of it. So the message that we sent out as we ran the campaign was unity, one public voice, accountability. You'll know who screwed up, and you can hold them accountable. No tax change, and you'll have better services. Well, what do I mean by that? County had an EMS district, as an example. County had EMS districts. City had EMS districts. When you got to this imaginary boundary, then all of a sudden it was another EMS ambulance from other government that ended up showing up. And so our argument was we will do away with the boundaries, and we will be able to position EMS community-wide so that at nighttime, they'll be more likely to be out into the suburbs where people are at night with their families. And at daytime, they would be more near the office buildings and industrial parks where, in fact, most people are working. Same thing with the police. We said, you know, we've got these artificial boundaries. And if we take the boundaries down, we'll be able, and in fact, we did put 100 more policemen on the street as a result of not needing as many colonels and generals and admirals and all those kinds of people, and we were able to get them into and onto the street. So we said, give us that opportunity. And the final thing that we said was we'll bring better services in a consolidated way using the West Nile virus. If you remember, the mosquito issue was a big issue back in that period of time. And in the city, we taught our solid waste management people and all of our public works people how to use these little pellets that they would carry in a little bag. So if they were out doing a job and they saw standing water, they threw the pellet into the standing water and it killed whatever larvae might be there. Well, and we said to the people in the county, you don't have anybody doing mosquito control. Let us take these folks and then teach your folks when the new merger comes about, and we'll have 150, 250 people trying to respond to this West Nile concern that was really an important issue. So we ran a campaign. It was a real campaign. We had phone banks. We had direct mail. We had, I made speeches all over the community. Mitch McConnell and I, County Judge Jackson and Mayor Armstrong, may he rest in peace, were the 4 co-chairs of running the campaign. McConnell had tried it, I guess he was county judge in '82 and had failed, and he very much wanted to be involved. So the 4 of us worked on it. Every living mayor, every living county judge in America, in Louisville, were for it. Every county judge, every living mayor. We also had opportunities to get as many people in the business community. They raised the money for us. We put a campaign together, both Democrats and Republicans, as you can imagine, with Senator McConnell and myself. And there we went. So we won. The vote was 54-46, both inside the city and outside the city, interestingly enough, 54-46. And so what happened in the first couple of years? Well, and this is the conclusion, Mr. Chairman. I don't want you to get antsy on me. What happened the first couple of years? Well, with merging the mayor and the county judge, we saved $700,000 a year, just because we only had 1 executive office. We didn't have 2. We saved $800,000 a year in our banking, because we got a heck of a deal with a larger account from the competition among the banks. We saved $2 million a year on lease payments, because in the old days, the city didn't have any space left, so we were leasing. The county didn't have any office business left. They were leasing. When we put everything together, and we decreased our employees by 20% over time, didn't lay anybody off, we ended up saving the lease payments we no longer had to use. We saved $6 million on our vehicle purchasing and fleet management. We saved, we took Metro Call, which was available inside the city. It was called City Call when I started, and made it Metro Call so people could call 311 and be able to get assistance. We worked with the suburban fire departments. For the first time, the leadership of the suburban fire department met with us and the chief of the Old City Urban Fire Department and looked at ways to better comprehensively provide coverage throughout the community. For example, out in I think it was the Okolona Fire Department, there was concern that there had been flash flooding in some of the streams, and they needed, I wrote it down, what do they call it? Swift boat recovery boats, whatever it was. Anyway, we put it in the budget, and we paid for that out of capital, and we put one out at Okolona, and we put one somewhere out in the center part, and then somewhere in the Far East to be able to have these swift boat facilities available. We got the highest rating this community's ever received from Moody's on Wall Street, based on the financial strength of putting the two together. We were able to put 100 more police officers on the street, which was at that time very, very well received, and I suspect would be today again. And there we went. So we rolled out the government. The image, the symbol of my administration in that first year of merger was the duck, because we wanted people to think we were just smoothly running right on top of that lake. But, buddy, we were paddling like hell to keep everything afloat, and ultimately gave us the opportunity to bring the government to where it is today. So maybe it wasn't as short as it should have been, but I wanted to be sure you understood how things went.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone have any questions? Councilman Piagentini?
Thank you, Councilman Piagentini, Metro Council District 19. Maybe not a question for the mayor, but maybe more of a statement of something we need to pull up, because I think one of the questions, I know we had talked about this in some of our original meetings, is what was the agreement on who was supposed to do what, right? Because now, I mean, there's still Metro Council members from the original council still on council.
Right.
So we've spoken to them. And some of the suburban mayors, Mayor Jung and others who remember and were part of those discussions going way back, right? But I would tell you my experience being somebody who didn't live here through it, in asking those questions, a lot of times I get conflicting answers. You know, some people remember it, oh no, you know, Metro was supposed to do X, Y, and Z, and then you'll speak to somebody else, well, oh no, that wasn't the agreement, it was this. So you mentioned, and I just want to be super clear about, I think, what you said, which was the broad brushstrokes of merger were very high level, and the detail of who was doing what was going to be done by that first council, the first 26. So it probably behooves us, there's got to be a series of ordinances.
It was an ordinance.
An ordinance, okay.
Ordinance number one at the first meeting ever was the merger of everything.
Okay,
But let me answer your question with specific examples.
please.
You're exactly right. Things were evolving. And I'll give you two examples. About 4 or 5 months into the new government, I get a call from a suburban mayor saying there's a deer dead on our road. So, and I said, well, you know, Mr. Mayor, we'll pick it up. So I called, I think it was the Works Department, might have been Solid Waste, but I think it must have been Works, because the director of our Works Department was the former county director of Works, Republican guy, interestingly enough. And I said, Mayor so-and-so called me, they got a deer out there, we ought to go pick it up. He said, we don't pick them up inside suburban communities. I said, what do you mean don't pick them up? He said, well, we just don't pick them up. If there's something going on inside a suburban community, that's up to them. I said, well, they pay this Metro tax. We should pick it up. So he said, Mayor, would you like us to pick it up? And I said, yeah, I'd like you to pick it up. So it got picked up. Second example, St. Matthews. I don't remember how they called me, but the mayor called, I think it was Bernie Bowling at the time, and he said, we want to do a downtown development plan. And part of when you go up Lexington Road, Frankfurt Avenue, it's in the old city, but at some point you hit the county in St. Matthews. And he said, would you all be willing through your economic development funds to join with us in the plan? So I called the economic development people and said, we don't do anything in suburban cities. You know, we're a county government, we don't do anything in suburban cities. And I said, but they pay this tax, why don't you do it? And so we put up $25,000 to match St. Matthews' $25,000 to do a $50,000. They were having all sorts of accidents along the Vogue Theater, Lexington Road, et cetera, and they restructured and laid that out. So the answer to your question is, things evolved. You know, every item didn't have its T's crossed and I's dotted, but people of good faith trying to make the thing work just worked through it. And those are just two examples I remember.
No, that's great, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that. And even very recently, we had this issue with Louisville fire and suburban fire. Now, EMS crosses very commonly, right? That's, you know, that's not an issue. But the fire departments really had this hard line. And it became an issue in at least two circumstances just in the last couple of years, where the closer responding fire department would have been the opposite side, right? And we've just now created an agreement that now solves that, right? So to your point, even more evolution recently. But yeah, I think it'd be still interesting to go back to grab the original ordinance one. And then to your point, maybe even try to document some of those evolutions. Because again, I would say as somebody who represents some suburban cities, it has to this day been an issue of understanding of that evolution and where the line is on who should be doing what. Because to be fair to Mayor Fisher, as an example here, I don't want to, get all over him and his administration for something that really it's understood the suburban city's doing and vice versa. So, but thank you. I really appreciate the context.
We found that in the county, they had not invested as the city had in our park system, as an example. And so we really got aggressive. We built the new golf course pro shop at Ventnor, right outside of J-Town. We built one out at Long Run. We went out Dixie Highway to Sun Valley, which had a horrendous 9-hole golf course, and we added 9 holes. I remember going with a friend from Fairdale, and we were driving by, and there was a park that had 2 tennis courts. Both nets were down. And I said to him, how long have those nets been down? He said, they've been down for months. And I said, if a net was down in Tyler Park, those nets would have been put up because people wouldn't have accepted it. We found that a lot of folks outside the old city just had gotten to the point of accepting things that weren't. I'll give you another example. I got a call from Councilman Henderson, who's I'm sitting in, I think, and from Valley Station. And he comes in to see me, and he says, how come it takes so long to get a junk car picked up, an abandoned car out here in Valley Station? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I talked to one of the council members who used to be an alderman, and in the old city of Louisville, we would pick up an abandoned car in 48 hours. That was our rule of thumb. I'm sure sometimes we didn't make it, but that was our rule of thumb. I said, he said, it's taken me 2 months to get it picked up. I said, first thing, we're only in this government for 2 months, so give me a break. And secondly, I said, and this was the real kicker, how long did it take you to get an abandoned car picked up in the old county? And Henderson looked at me and he said, well, they never picked them up. So I said, so give me a break and let me get into this flow, and we're going to try to make it work, because picking up abandoned cars, whether you're in a suburban city, an urban service district, or in an unincorporated area, it ought to be the same. We ought to be able to do it the same way. Those were the kinds of things that we dealt with that were tough, but took time to get into the flow.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I think you said one thing that was, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Ms. Butler.
Thank you, Mary Ann Butler. Mayor, you talked about merging the city and the county, and back when it was city of Louisville, they used to get tons of CDBG dollars. County got some. When you merged, how did that change? And how did it change population-wise with the census and that sort of thing? Because that's what all those federal dollars are based on.
Yeah, we had a big argument with the Census Bureau because we counted everybody that voted for or against me as a citizen. So if you lived in, Prospect, or you lived in J-Town, or you lived in St. Matthews, you voted for a council member and you voted for or against the mayor. So we thought they were all in our city. And that gave us a population of 750,000. And that gave us the 16th largest city in America. And that was one of the things we sold, that we'd be in the top 20 list when decision makers, business people were looking to locate. They wanted to be in a community that wasn't too large, but was still large enough to have a sophisticated, school system and arts community and athletics and universities, et cetera. And so the Census Bureau came in and said all the suburban cities are taken out of the new city of Louisville. And we argued vociferously, and we lost. So some of those larger cities, probably 3 or 4 of them, probably get a little bit of CDBG. We get what the county got and what the city got. But we were hopeful that we would be a community of 700 plus and be able to argue every time a grant came out that we would be in a situation to receive a larger amount of money. In fact, they rolled back, I don't know, maybe 100,000. I'm not sure what the numbers are right now, but in the suburban communities. But that was how that worked. Is that what you remember, Tina? Yeah.
Thank you. Mary Ann Butler again. The other question is, you mentioned several cities that had mergers well before us, Nashville, Indianapolis, others. Do you know of any of those communities that still have suburban cities in them and/or are entertaining the thought of additional cities within their merged area?
You know, Indianapolis is a unique situation. And I'll tell you how unique it was. The first year I was mayor, I set up a Leadership Louisville alumni luncheon where I would bring a mayor and he or she would speak about whatever the issue of the day was. And we did it for the first time, and we brought the mayor of Indianapolis. And I'm sitting with him at lunch, and we're talking before he speaks, and he tells me that we Indianapolis, he said, I love what you've done with the police department. I said, what do you mean? He said, we never merged our police department. I said, what do you mean? He said, the county sheriff handles the county policing, and the city police chief handles the city police. He said, I think I'm going to go back and try to change it. Now, this is 25 years later, which he did get changed, by the way. Indianapolis has about 10 or 12 cities. In fact, I looked it up because you had asked me if I knew of any. Cities like Speedway that has like 15,000 people. Cities like Lawrence, Indiana, which is in Marion County, which has 50,000 people. So there's about 10 or 12 of those cities, but they don't vote for the urban government mayor. They run their own thing, do their own, I think. You don't think so? No, I believe you. I think that's right. The answer to your question is, I don't know of any that have been created, suburban cities. If anything, they would, if you're doing it right, people would feel comfortable and you would say, I don't want to pay any more taxes. You know, in the old city of Louisville, we called them neighborhoods. And in my neighborhood association, we pay $50 a year and we get flowers along Frankfurt Avenue or something. I mean, you know, if you're getting good services, then you shouldn't have to, and you should be getting good services. So Jacksonville is the largest geographic city in America. Jacksonville. Jacksonville passed one of these things that you guys in the legislature have yet to give us the right to do, which is the LIFT program. They put on the ballot, this is the program where you have so many capital projects and the people vote on it and they put a tax on themselves for 20 years, and when the bonds are over, the tax goes away. Jacksonville, when they were looking to build an NFL stadium, they put on the ballot NFL stadium, a new downtown library, a new suburban baseball complex, and then they made a commitment to pave every road in the city if you vote for this tax. And of course, once you put it that way, they voted for it. But it's the biggest geographic city in America when they merged. Nashville obviously merged a long, long time ago. I know of no city inside Nashville. But Indianapolis is a peculiar situation. And, you know, the other interesting thing is the names of these communities. Indianapolis is Indianapolis Marion Unigov. Most people call it Indianapolis. In Nashville, it's Nashville-Davidson Metro Government. Most people call it Nashville. But for some reason, in Louisville, we're Louisville, Jefferson County Metro, and people call it Louisville Metro. I've never understood that because there is no such thing as a Metro mayor. If you look at the statute, there's a mayor. There is a Metro Council, but there's a mayor, not a Metro mayor. So hopefully someday people will call us Louisville. And I'll tell you why it started Louisville Metro, is we made a conscious effort to ensure that the county would not think it was a city takeover. If you just called it Louisville, you know, it would seem like Louisville absorbed Jefferson County. So we decided we would start referring to it for a while as Louisville Metro, remember? And we said to the media, we're going to call it Louisville Metro, but over time, nobody calls it Unigov, in Lexington, it's called Lexington Urban County Government. Yeah, but they call it Lexington. So that's why we called it Louisville Metro, because words matter, and we thought that would give people outside the community a comfort level.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that was a good rendition. I would note that I've only said I live in Louisville. I've never said I live in Louisville Metro. And I've never lived inside well, I guess I have for a few years, lived inside the old city limits. Got a comment and then, a couple comments. One is, I remember voting for this in 2000. I was a young man, was in college, and I voted for it for one reason. I didn't want Lexington to be bigger than Louisville.
And
Can you comment on that?
was a significant reason. We played that as strong as we could, that Lexington, although they were merged, what in the next census looked like that Louisville, which was not merged, would become the second largest city. There wasn't apples and apples, but still, and there were people that voted just like you did simply for that reason.
I was a young man. I didn't know the ins and outs and who was going to reply or respond on a police, but that's the reason that I voted for it, and I lived in the South End then. I would note, I think you've hit on a few things that I think most of us here, I think all of us here are very proud of Louisville. I know I am. I live in Louisville. But you mentioned people of good faith figured it out. The people who I represent don't think that there's a person in good faith in the mayor's office today. If you were mayor, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. Hopefully our next mayor is a person of good faith who plows our snow quickly, like he does other places, who sends different services out to us, which he's not today. Also, you merge the city police, but it's not really merged anymore. LMPD is. But if I get in a car wreck in Middletown, LMPD is not responding. If someone has a burglary in Douglas Hills, LMPD may respond, but they're probably not going to. It's probably going to be Middletown or J-Town or Anchorage Police. Now Linden has its own police department. We police ourselves because LMPD didn't. Not because of LMPD, not because of the great officers of LMPD, but because of leadership at City Hall. Also with respect to EMS, if you go out to in Shelbyville Road today, down to Shelbyville Road today, and you get in and have a heart attack or something, Louisville EMS will never respond. It will always be Anchorage, Middletown, always. We will respond inside Louisville, but they don't respond outside to us, even though they have countywide jurisdiction. Those are the reasons. That's a logistical issue, not a legal issue. Those are the reasons that we are having this conversation. And you say, if things are done right, you don't need these new cities. Things aren't being done right. Now, hopefully we can go away where we don't have more incorporations of cities or any annexations, and we do things like taxing districts, which I hope we all talk about. But the glory days of the early 2000s are not here now. And my constituents, which is where the lion's share of the growth is in this county, are not being served by City Hall the way that they think they ought to be served with the taxes that they're being paid. That's the reason we're here. So I wanted to comment on a few things that you had mentioned, the good faith, if it's being done right, and then the merger issue. And we are all, I think I'm very proud of Louisville. I think everybody else is as well, but it's not all unicorns and rainbows. Anybody else have any comment or any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur, District 4. In reviewing the National League of Cities, consolidated cities and counties, it looks like Jacksonville, Florida doesn't allow new cities. The same goes for Lexington, Kentucky, New Orleans, Louisiana, and Nashville. Do you remember when merger occurred in the early 2000s, if you anticipated or if anyone in your administration anticipated new cities being created?
No, it was just the opposite, council member. The feeling was that that we would not have any additional cities, and in fact, as occurred with the fire districts, we would have fewer over time that would, I grew up in a five block city. Why? So over time, the thought was you would see many of those, because they couldn't get people to run for the council and they couldn't get people to be mayor, that they would begin to consolidate with others. But it was just the opposite. There was no thinking. It was just, we did not expect any additional cities, and we're hopeful that there would be fewer But again, that was by choice of the cities, the suburban cities. We couldn't tell them to go out of business. They had to make that decision themselves.
And my second question, and I totally understand what we just heard about people wanting more services, but to your point, it seems like some of the people themselves might not want to provide those services. I don't know if you saw earlier this year in August, the Courier-Journal reported in nearly half of the small cities, there weren't enough candidates to fill out a full completement of the city council or the city commissions. Reading on into that article, this isn't a new issue. So I'm curious of, during your time, during your heyday, if you remember any cities, constituents from those cities who did not have elected officials filling those positions that called you for help because they were unable to operate.
You know, I can't remember any of the specifics, but I just know the anecdotes of my own dad, may he rest in peace, who they constantly tried to get him to be on the city council of this 5-block city, and he didn't want to deal with dogs who were neighbors complaining about dogs. And so and when I asked him one day, why does this place exist? And he said, we wanted streetlights, and we wanted garbage once a week, and we wanted to be able to deduct the tax that we paid for garbage and for streetlights. And therefore, we created a city, which I'm not sure that's a good basis, but that's what he said.
Well, I felt this pain. If we had a new city for everybody who wanted a street light in our district, it'd look kind of crazy. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman.
We have made it to where I think it's 6,000, maybe 7,500, I don't remember. So it can't be those small cities, those very small cities.
Behind you.
Representative Fleming.
Thank you. Beside the mayor and Senator Adams, I think we're the only people here in this room, or at the beginning, if I recall. And just to let you know, Councilman, that's always been the case. I was a suburban city mayor as well as a council, a commissioner, and there's always been a struggle to fill that out, going back to early 90s, if not 80s, to try to fill those things out. So that's always been there. I understand you're coming from, but that's always been there. The other thing, when we're going through the merger in the first 6 months, there were a lot of growing pains. We tried to combine 5,000 ordinances, which was not an easy task to go through that process. But we were, and I, like the mayor said, I mean, I supported, like the chairman, I supported that because I felt that there needed to have a unified approach in terms of economic development in order to help citizens throughout the county. And I think this has come to fruition in terms of we need to look at what is our ROI. Are we fulfilling what was promised some time ago, right or wrong, what it is? I think we just got to go through that diligence and so forth. And you're right. I think the mayor said something about ineffective delivery services, and that's probably true in both the city and county. And so the hope was there to try to go and balance that out and so forth. So I appreciate the historical perspective of the mayor. And give us a good idea of what's going on. I know there's a lot of documentations out there that's available, but I'm hopefully that whatever the data shows, where we go through, that we're going to come in a much better position in order to propel Louisville, because I'm a supporter of Louisville. I love Louisville. I've been raised here and want to make sure that we're the best we can be and hopefully get in the top 10 and not just a 16 or where we are now. I hope we get in a better position. So I just wanted to just make those quick comments, but I appreciate the mayor sticking with us through those years. Mayor for life, I know that, but then again, you know, I think the mayor did a good job, you know, in trying to coalesce a lot of things, and we may agree to disagree on things, but that's fine, that's part of it. But I think I do appreciate his service and what he did, so thank you, Mayor, very much, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, thank you. Bonnie Jung from Douglas Hills. Councilman Arthur, let me clarify a little bit about some small cities that the article said may not have folks running. A lot of times in these small areas, they wait until after the filing deadline, and then the governor has 30 days to appoint the council and a mayor of any city. And this has just recently happened with Hillview. Hillview had been, didn't have a mayor, didn't have a council for about 5 years. they had some folks that got together, and it was over trash. And so they contacted the governor, and the governor has appointed a mayor and 6 members to be on the Hillview Council. So they are a council again. Some of the smaller ones, like I said, they either wait for the governor to, or they don't want to pay the $50 filing fee, and you know that's absolutely true. So, but the other thing about this commission is we may find out that there might be some cities that want to annex and want to join another city or something of that nature, you know? And so I'm looking forward to whatever we can do. I would have loved it if a deer had been hit in Douglas Hills and Metro or Louisville would have come to get it. And I think a lot what you're finding is smaller cities feel like that they're still providing those out your front door services. I also want to thank you because you were president of the Jefferson County League of Cities at one time. So appreciate all that you did and all that you helped to get this started. Thank you.
Earl Jones here. Well, one observation I would make after hearing this history and some of the other comments is that, of course, the legislation actually sets up the possibility for Louisville losing its position, I think now is number 29 on the census tract, to becoming possibly number 50. And so the consequence of that, I assume and I hope, will be part of the consideration of this commission as it goes through this process of considering overall what the benefits are and how we might basically advance the interests of the entire community, which I have real questions would be advanced by the shrinkage of the community in the eyes of the larger world.
Senator.
Senator Demus, Mayor, I think that that was Holly Villa, now Hillview. Yeah, okay. And Councilman Arthur, I think you hit on a good point that it is hard to run a city and to get people to, as candidates and to serve. There's many cities throughout the state that are going defunct, and we're going to do away with their being able to be a city. So I don't think that, I know we're arguing about the, whether they can consolidate in that, mostly for the south end, Fern Creek, Valley Station, that's what it was mainly for, because in the east end they can annex. I think you should worry more about the annexations than a consolidation. And as Mayor Abramson said, if you provide the services, they're not going to want to incorporate. And the legislature, which I know many are upset with for doing this, made it very hard to consolidate. I think it's like 70% have to actually want to do it. So it was made hard for a reason. And I also think that it prompts the cities to provide the services, so that won't happen. And I want to thank you too, Mayor, for, I think a lot of people talk about term limits, but in this instance, it probably took someone to be there and to stay there and be the steady Eddie for Steady Jerry for the while to bring the city along. So I want to thank you for that. That's all I want to say.
I think I got elected because I had the best chance of making the fewest mistakes in putting the two together. That's why I think I ultimately got elected.
President Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to Mayor Emerson, you know, I was listening to you reiterate all those things, and I was a younger person back then, and you brought back a lot of memories. Some of those things I remembered, and you know, being on the council for 12 years and watching government move. Really, what you did was you were like changing the wheels on the fire truck while it was on the way to the fire, and that's not easy. And so I just really want to congratulate you and thank you for what you did for our community to get us to where we are today. Your leadership is immeasurable. I still talk about you being, you know, who you are to everybody I meet. And so I just want to say thank you.
All right. I missed Councilwoman Butler and Senator Nemeth, so I want to make sure I'm looking around again. Just make sure I don't miss anybody. Okay. Mayor, thank you. We will ask Mr. Coombs to take the mic, and the program is yours, sir. As long as the green button's on, you're live.
Oh, thank you, David. So I'm Paul Coombs, Emeritus Professor of Economics at University of Louisville, which means I'm a retired old professor. I brought with me also Bill Hoyt here, Professor Bill Hoyt. He's a distinguished economics professor at University of Kentucky and really a world-class scholar on public economics. So I thought his brain would be very useful as we develop the methodology to try to measure these things correctly. And also you'll see on this handout that you've got the name of Matt Ruther. Dr. Matt Ruther is the Kentucky State demographer, and I contacted him last week as we were having discussions about how to host this. I thought it would be ideal to have this hosted at University of Louisville as opposed to retired Coombs's office because you might want to update this in a few years. It needs an institutional long-term home. Bill and UK offered to do it, but I think it would be better to have it at U of L here since it is our community. And Matt agreed to that. He was very excited to participate. So those are the three names at the top there. We'll come back and if Bill wants to say something when I finish. Like everybody else, I enjoyed all of Jerry's war stories. It brought back a lot of memories. Actually, he asked me 20-something years ago to help the city do the revenue forecast with Jane Driscoll and Daniel Frock, and I did that for many years, and that helped me learn the budget and the revenue sources. So I'm pretty up to speed on the details of the city's budget. And the other project that I've been involved with that you might remember, there's a sort of a rule of thumb out there that Jefferson County only gets back 50 cents of the dollar that it sends to Frankfurt. That was me. I did that study about 30 years ago and updated it twice, and it's true, actually. So the reason I bring that up, it's similar to this in that we looked at the whole state budget, all the revenues and expenditures, and we allocated it to all the counties. And of course, Jefferson County is the engine of the state. And go look at the study if you like. It's incredibly detailed, and there's no disputing the conclusion that we're generating the revenues and get half of it back in services.
Mr. Coombs, this is Jason Nemus. If anybody wants to get a hold of that, how would they?
Oh,
if any citizen wants that,
email me. We'll have to share my email address here shortly anyway.
Okay. Thank you.
Communication. Yeah, I've got it. I think we did it 3 times. Happy to. I guess the other institutional thing I'll bring up is I was actually on the merger task force 20 years ago, and it'd be 22 years ago in 2000. And I was appointed, I was told I was the only person appointed to the task force that was appointed by the Republican county judge and the Democrat mayor. So I was kind of proud that it was a bipartisan appointment. All right, so let's get into a little bit of the details here. I'm sure you've all seen the legislation, HB 314, and the pregnant sentence here that got us involved is it calls for a thorough review of the distribution and provision of government services between the Louisville metro government and the suburban cities and special service districts within the consolidated local government jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. So that calls for a big measurement study. And so we were alerted to this and have been discussing with David James, Ken Fleming, others, and put together this little outline or proposal just in the past few days to respond to this. No need to get into the weeds here. I'll just give you a couple examples, starting with taxes. This is a real segue from our discussion we just had. We intend to get our hands on the complete property tax base for the county by street address. So the PVA has it, the sheriff sends the tax bills, that data's out there by street address. We should be able, using GIS tools, to aggregate that up to suburban cities, to the urban service district, to the unincorporated areas, to metro council districts, to zip codes, whatever you like. And we have a GIS person on the team that we put together who's really good at this with logic. So that, on the revenue side, that's the approach we'll take. We'll go down to the most fine-grained data available that the city and the county agencies have and aggregate it up for you all to these governmental jurisdictions for your policy discussion. That's the spirit of what we're going to do. And insurance premiums, taxes, occupational taxes, on and on. Go into the silos, find it at the street address if possible, and aggregate it up. On the service side, I think it's a lot messier, but obviously it's really important, right? So we could talk about a couple of examples. Police. So David James and I were talking about this yesterday, and because obviously he's a former policeman, he knows the police department. I said, how are we going to get this data? He said, well, actually, in the case of police, it should be easy because of a recent U.S. Department of Justice fight that's going on now, where I think, David, you said that you all were required to put together 5 years worth of data on police runs by address. We're going to get our hands on that, and that's going to show us how the police budget is being spent, at least inside the urban service district. For suburban cities, we'll be assuming, I don't know if this is right, Bonnie, but we'll assume that your expenditures on police, do you have police? No, you don't. But so Jeffersontown does, right? St. Matthews does, Shively does, et cetera. So we'll assume that their police budget gets spent inside their jurisdiction. And obviously there's probably some crossover stuff, but I'm not sure how we can measure that messy stuff. So anyway, that's the spirit of it. Go into each one of the service buckets, each one of the revenue buckets, get the data at the lowest level of geography, aggregate it up to the things you're interested in, and come back and show it to you. We also want to make this very transparent to the public, and we'll develop a website at the University of Louisville. All the data, or at least the aggregated data, will be there. All the methods will be documented and footnoted, et cetera, so that anybody wants to challenge it or tell us a better way to do it, give us a call and we'll make it better. I think it'll take about 6 months, just because of how messy it is. We've put together a little budget at the end, and you'll see that I've assembled a team, including Bill and Matt Ruther, to include Barry Kornstein, who worked with me for 25 years at U of L. He's a top-notch, he's actually a MIT math major who's a data guru. And Chris Butts, who actually works for TARC, but he does moonlighting, and he's an incredible GIS person. And then Bill has a graduate student, a PhD student, who is wanting to develop a dissertation around some of this, so we're going to bring him along too. So I'll stop there. Bill, do you have anything you want to add? By the way, Bill was the top person on the Jerry Abramson-led Lieutenant Governor Blue Ribbon Task Force on Tax Reform. Was that 10, 12 years ago, Bill? I can't remember. Yeah,
2010.
Bill led that effort
Yeah.
with Jerry. Go ahead.
So I don't have too much to add to Paul. I will say that this is, as he mentioned, an area of interest in mine, and while a lot of discussion here of specific cities with unified governments, there is kind of a broader literature, and maybe some of this we can pull on to understand about extent of service areas, the advantages and disadvantages associated with those. And so I'm hoping I can bring some insights into that, and some of my past work and some actually current work is actually very relevant, and hopefully that'll aid in some of this. But as Paul mentioned, I think in particular, some of the issues with trying to understand costs, how they might be related to the extent of the service coverage and things like that are challenging, and hopefully we can maybe get some insights from other sources as well. I think that's all I probably have to add. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to open it up for questions in a moment, but before I do, I'm going to ask President James and Representative Fleming if they have any comments, since this committee charged them with the responsibility of talking to Mr. Coombs. So David or Ken, anybody? Yes, sir.
I start. Ken and I met with our gentleman here, I think it was probably 2 weeks ago, maybe, and we explained to them about the commission and what he and I had been tasked to do, and I watched their eyes glaze over, and so because they heard numbers and that's what makes them tick. But we really talked about how we could get the data that we don't have anywhere else and put it all in one place, and how we can have that to be in the most transparent way available so that anybody and everybody could see it and understand it. We also wanted to make sure that when I talk to both Bill and Paul, I always have to tell them, tell that to me in David language, and so which means not the mathematician language. And so we both said that we wanted it to be so that anybody and everybody could understand what it is that the information and the data that we want to look at. And so I support this proposal. I think it would help us tremendously. It would help our county to know what we're talking about. And thank you.
Representative Fleming.
Thank you, and don't sell your short, David. You're a smart guy. So this is Ken Fleming, State Representative. If you ever looked at the Blue Ribbon report that he put together, Bill put together, which I have from cover to cover, it's very comprehensive, very thorough, and I'm very, very impressed. So between Bill and Paul, which I'm familiar with a lot of Paul's documents, I think we'll get a really good product coming out of this that will put us in a better position for us to move forward. They both know, and I think David would concur with this, that during this time frame of 6 months, they might come to us with different additional questions or concerns or thoughts or direction. And even though there's a not to succeed amount in there, I think we understand the gravity of the situation, but to be very conscious of, what additional costs, if there are any at all, will come to this committee and we can discuss it and go forward with it. But like David, I support this, and I think we'll get a good product out of these two gentlemen and their team.
All right, Councilman Piagentini, and then Councilman Arthur, and then I'll open the floor even further.
Thank you. First of all, gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm very much in support of this proposal. Can't wait to see your work. First of all, as far as gathering data, I can tell you a couple years ago, I actually tried to get property tax data. I went to the PVA. They said, go to the sheriff's office. Go to the sheriff's office. It was like pulling teeth. So my point in saying that, I finally got property tax data by zip code on a CD because there was no other way to transmit the data for some reason. My point in saying that is some of this data you're going to be very dependent on departments, in some cases, that we have questionable jurisdiction over, right? The sheriff's office is a perfect example. I'm sure they're going to cooperate, but if you have any problems getting the data right out of the gate, please let us know. Please let David, myself, anybody else know. We would be glad to advocate and make sure all these other agencies understand the critical nature of getting you the information as quickly as possible, and in the way that you're asking for it, if it's technologically possible for them to do it. I was a little nervous about some of the comments the sheriff's office made about the way they collect this information, so fingers crossed that we can get it to you in a way that's workable. I did want to point out two quick things, and again, I don't think anything needs to change on the proposal, just something to think about. Number one, related to fire and EMS, we already talked about the suburban fire districts. My point in bringing that up is both when you're calculating service usage for fire and EMS, again, for fire, it's going to be much more clean in that it's actually very, very rare that it's not unprecedented, it's just extremely rare that suburban fire crosses into the urban services fire and Louisville fire crosses into suburban fire. But it is extremely common that EMS crosses over. Suburban fire EMS comes into the city fairly frequently, and Louisville fire also goes out to the Louisville EMS goes out to the suburban areas. So, that is from a service provision point of view, which again, I think MetroSafe might be very helpful in getting you this information, in that they would know where the runs are going and who was dispatched. So I think there's ways we can get you the service information. But also from a tax basis, let's also make sure and you should be able to get this in the property tax information, because I'm assuming the sheriff also collects the suburban fire tax. But just like there's a lot of confusion around this just in the city, yes, Metro pays a higher rate, but they're also not accounting for the fact that somebody, like myself, who lives under Middletown Anchorage Fire, I have an additional property tax rate that's added to pay for that service. So I just wanted to bring that up. And then related to occupational tax, I've seen stats from those advocating for the Central Business District that attribute all of the occupational tax for a business that locates in the Central Business District to the Central Business District. I'm going to pick on Humana as an example, right? So Humana employs X thousands of people. If they put their address, and I think the Revenue Commission would say this, and that's the other thing when you're collecting the data, the Revenue Commission is a little shaky on how they get their occupational tax data. I've heard that they sometimes get the home address, and many times it's the business address. So, for example, I've seen these huge charts where they say, okay, occupational tax, Central Business District has all this, occupational tax, and the rest of the areas of the city, it's very low. Well, first of all, there's now the most common, I'm just reading in commercial real estate circles, the occupancy rate of some of these buildings, it's very low. It's in the 40-something percentile in major downtown. And that's not true to Louisville, that's true in almost every city. So, and because most of these businesses have gone to a hybrid model where people are working from home for periods of time and working for the office in periods of time. My point in saying this is, in addition to that, people that work in downtown will live not necessarily in downtown. They might live in District 19, District 15, District 17, and all over the city. They opt, just like they picked a business to work for, they also picked a neighborhood to live in. And so I think we need to be, I don't know how you're going to do this, and I don't know if there's an easy way to do it, but I just want to make sure that we're attributing occupational tax not only to where the business is located, but also indicating where it's generated from a residential point of view. So again, I'm not saying it should go all in the residence or all in the business. I just think it both needs to be accounted for. I don't know how easy that's going to be, but I think it's wrong to do it just one way or the other, just putting it in their place of residence or just putting it in their business. And I've seen both happen, and it's like, well, it's kind of a both and. So just wanted to bring that up as you talked about occupational tax and how to attribute it. So thank you very much.
Councilman Arthur.
Thank you, Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur. I'm just curious, could you clarify, you're talking about the lowest level of geography possible, that street addresses and parcels or parcel IDs are one and the same?
Oh, sorry. Thank you, David.
Mr. Coombs.
Yes. Paul Coombs, yes. So your question is, when you get into property tax data, there's a parcel ID, and that may not be the same as a household or a taxpayer?
Well, I'm just curious, will there be a discrepancy when you look at street addresses versus the parcel IDs? Because I know parcels would be the lowest level of geography, but would those be different?
That's a good example of how messy this is going to be to account for that. I mean, ideally, we want to know at the household level for residential taxes, where that street address and how much taxes are coming from that so we can aggregate it up. But I haven't thought through the issue of parcel IDs. I'm familiar with it. I know that's the way the sheriff records it all, but I haven't thought through how we'll deal with it. Yeah.
Understood. My second question is around going further on geography. Depending on the funding source, local, state, federal, we could have different reporting requirements, whether that's a neighborhood, a zip code, a council district, and so forth. So I'm just curious about any pre-existing data that Metro has. do you anticipate taking that information and then trying to consolidate it down to that street address or that parcel if we already have it, or would that be impossible?
Let me see if I follow you. So if the agencies have it at the street level address, obviously that's the best we can get, right? And so we'll aggregate that up to these different jurisdictions. You're asking the opposite, or are you saying?
Well, some of the reporting requirements might not have the street addresses with them. They might be based on a council district or a zip code or a neighborhood or a census tract. Would you be able to consolidate it down further, or is that impossible?
That's part of the art of doing this, and I'm just not into the details yet. For example, the American Community Survey comes out every year, and the 5-year average on Jefferson County is pretty rich on household income, household values, commuting, and we will use that to try to allocate things where we don't have administrative data. Obviously, administrative data is the best, but so it'll be all of these little tricks and tools that we use to get the most precision we can. One of my favorite sayings is I stole it from a Nobel Prize winner. He said, torture the data until nature confesses. And that's my motto. Keep torturing it, and it'll eventually tell you the truth.
I think I know the answer to this last question based
Okay.
on your other answers, but and I'm not sure how to answer it. So using the parcels or the street addresses, we're talking about housing. Downtown has a large concentration of people who are unhoused. I'm curious if you've considered how to account for some of the services where it might not necessarily be tied to a street address.
Again, that's back to the art when we get into that.
Understood.
So there are probably not a lot of taxes flowing from the unhoused population. So that the revenue side is probably pretty easy. The expenditure side, how you allocate that, we'll just have to use our judgment and explain how we do it. And if you think of a better way when we get to that, I'd be happy to hear your comments.
Thank you so much. And just for the record, I am supportive. Councilman Piagentini and I go back and forth a lot about capital and investment and the way that services are distributed. So I'm real interested to see this data broken down to the smallest level. So thank you.
Yeah.
Co-Chair Jones.
Mr. Bonnie Jung, I think I mentioned that just before we started about Parks and Recreation, and I might be a little confused on this. The USD, I have 2 parks and a swimming pool in my city. There's no metro funding has been used or other than a discretionary fund from my Metro Council folks. So I think when you find the parks in those cities, it's kind of like what the mayor said about picking up a deer in a suburban city. I don't think that any of these cities, I could be wrong, and I will help you research that, if any of these cities are receiving any dollars other than maybe through a discretionary fund or a grant. That's a possibility too, but I just don't want that to get skewed as to, where money is being spent. I'll be happy. Jefferson County League of Cities, and we talked about Kentucky League of Cities, will be able to help you with a lot of data concerning anything dealing with cities in Jefferson County.
So this is Coombs again. I've already collected that data from the Kentucky Department of Local Government, the Uniform Financial Information Reports, UFR database. So all cities in Kentucky are required to file annually budgets and statements of revenues and expenditures broken out in fairly good detail. So I've got that, and I have it historically for all the cities. And so we can see that, I don't know, Indian Hills, for example, or Javli, we know what they're spending on parks, what they're spending on public safety. That's going to be the easiest part of it. I won't say it's 100% accurate. I've seen problems with it, but we're definitely going to start there because it's so rich. So the suburban cities and the urban service district revenues and expenditures are fairly clean place to start.
Try to make it easy on you.
I appreciate that. This is going to be messier than our state study. I can tell.
Yeah, Earl Jones here. I would like if you all could just walk us through
what would this report look like? Your proposal here is full of information about data collection and how you'll report the data out. So are we going to be seeing something that's basically a series of numbers and data? What's the text around it? What's the story or the narrative that accompanies it, if indeed there will be anything like that? I ask this question particularly because of Mr. Hoyt's discussion about experience with looking at data like this in other cities. I was curious what that would mean and how that might be relevant here.
I think I understand your question. So the way I see this developing is we'll go at the lowest level, et cetera, and do things by category and then ultimately add across all those categories for all the revenue items and all the expenditure items, and then play back to you how much the suburban cities are spending on these categories, how much revenues are getting in these categories, the urban service district, how much revenue is it getting in these categories. So at the end, it'll be aggregated to the geographic levels I think you're most interested in, which is the urban service district, the suburban cities, and the unincorporated areas. I think that's where the tension is, right? And so, but between now and then, we have to go into all the silos and then add it up and show it to you. There would be a lot of maps involved, by the way. That's a lot easier to look at than a table of numbers. I think the best thing to do is come back to you in a few months when we're really deep into it and we've got a lot of results, and then start thinking jointly the best way to present it and show it to the public. I'm sure you have good ideas.
Mr. Hoyt?
Yeah, I would say, in sort of reference to how you might display in things, as Paul says, I think that's kind of a sensible way in the aggregate. And one approach, of course, in these studies is we are going to have disaggregated data. Obviously, we're not reporting anything at the street level or anything, but disaggregated by cities, for example, and different districts. My guess is that to make it sort of comprehensible, we don't want to have all of your 82, what number we have on 82 cities, but we could well imagine our analysis is going to require us to actually look at that and have aggregation for the most part. And so in terms of actual document, I can imagine an appendix that might be lengthy that has that kind of information to look at more detail, say geographically, as well as disaggregating by type of expense, by type of tax. And so, but I think that would be very difficult for as David James said, I can't quite remember how you quoted how it was supposed to be presented to you, but to make it sort of comprehensible, right, and be able to make some general statements on it.
Representative Stevenson.
Hi, this is Representative Stevenson, and I heard you say you were going to be looking at the taxes and what services were provided by the taxes. Does any of the work you're going to do, will it be able to identify, quantify what services are not being provided? I hear a lot of people saying, I can't get this service, I can't get that service, and yet I don't see any documentation of what's not gotten. Will you be able to quantify that, or is that outside the scope of what you propose?
Wow. So I guess logically, what we can document as being provided is a complement to what is not being provided. So it's going to just be a deduction from what we'll be able to identify as provided. So maybe in the narrative at the end, we can summarize those sorts of things that say the unincorporated areas of the county don't have X, Y, and Z. So sure, that's way down the road.
I understand. So if you give us a number, if you tell us what's being provided, how will we have the context of whether or not that's 100% of what's needed versus it's not enough?
Wow. Good question. I think these are the kind of discussions we'll have when we get everything loaded up that we can understand and present, and then help you all think through all of that. So this has never been done in Louisville, so we're just going to have to.
That's why Kentucky's going straight to the top, because we do the hard things. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Councilman Arthur and then Representative Fleming.
Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur, hopefully it saves you some time. Louisville is the third city in the country to go through the Parks for All program, where we have a lot of intense data around parks and recreation. An example, just to respond to something I heard earlier, there are 30 public parks that haven't had any capital investment in the past 2 decades. So it has some data that's already existing that I'm hoping you're able to use and work with to help with what you got going on. Thank you.
Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Fleming. What I'm envisioning, Paul and Bill, and Paul mentioned GIS, and obviously that's a lot of my background. What I would like to see, if it's possible, to, when you go through, present the data, to have a map, a heat map, or to show any type of change detections if you do it over the years, which might be difficult, but just have some type of a visualization of where things lie by polygons to show us what's going on in terms of, well, I think you understand what I'm getting at. So I think it'd be very, very helpful for a lot of us, and I think Earl mentioned, what kind of format we're going to see. You got a lot of numbers and charts and so forth, and that's good. And of course, I relish in that. But I think I'm also visual. So if you can have some type of maps, and I'll leave your discretion on how to present that and so forth. I have a question, one more follow-up on a question in terms of QA and QC, quality control and assurance and so forth. What would you be able to outline just some of your methodology in terms of going through and quality control in your data and providing assurances of how you're collecting it and how you're presenting that? Will y'all be able to go through that and explain that as well?
I'm not sure I caught all of it, but basically, we're going to document everything we do, and the methods, the data sources, the assumptions. We're academics. That's what we're trying to do. So did you have a specific silo in mind there?
No, I don't have it. No, I just want to make sure that when we go through the process, there's you have checkpoints and like dual control, those sorts of things we go through just to validate. And I know you two will probably, I know you'll do it just because you got a lot of brain power there as well as your team. I just want to make sure that the public knows that there's going to be a lot of control, a lot of quality control and quality assurances in order to put this thing together to make sure we have a good confidence in the data.
Yeah, and the way we do that, and we're trained to do that, is document everything, explain everything. So we won't make everybody read it, but it'll be on a website somewhere if someone wants to track it down or challenge it or improve it.
Just to Bill Hoyt, one of the things that, an obvious thing that we always do when we get data, particularly, say, a panel over time where we get to observe, say, a city or an individual, whatever it might be over time, and we have to do, because we do see errors, as you mentioned, is look for consistency in the data, and then we can kind of go backwards and try to resolve that. And certainly in some other studies that I've done, I'm sure Paul has the same thing, is, okay, there are errors, there may be errors, we've got to go back to source, try to see how we can address that, or possibly some of that may not be usable. So, but I think that's kind of a standard thing that we would follow.
This is Jason Nemus. Okay, I don't see any questions on the floor. I'm going to entertain a motion to accept the contract and allow Mr. Coombs and his team to get.
Motion to accept Bonnie Jung.
There's a motion and a second on the floor with Mayor Jung making the motion. Councilman Piagentini seconded. Comments?
Mary Ann Butler, I just have a point of clarification. Are you asking for us to make a recommendation to Metro Council to approve this? Because I don't think this commission has the ability to approve a contract for the city.
I don't know if President James has a comment on that, with something that
Say, we have the county attorney representative here. I don't know if they would know it, but
yeah, I would ask Councilman James to make a comment on that if it would, and then we'll go ahead.
Yeah, I think what we'd be voting on as a commission is that we're asking the mayor's office to work on a contract with the University of Louisville to do this on behalf of the commission as required by state law.
Right, and the statute requires it to be done, so I don't know that there's much discretion if we pass it, but does that resolve your question, Councilman Butler?
yeah, I just want to thank Mary Ann Butler. I just want to make sure, in case anyone's listening, we're not actually doing this contract. It is going to follow
That's right.
the rules and the laws.
Senator?
Senator Nemes, I have a question that President James brought up is we may have to go through the Metro Council for the funding, but I don't know that they're going to be actually doing the contract. You said to work on the contract. I think they would be voting on whether to accept the funding on the contract we accepted.
Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur, and I'm curious, I assume maybe President James can speak to this, if we've already identified the funding source, or if the mayor's office has already identified that funding source.
They have money.
I was about to say, we can make an adjustment to their budget if necessary.
People are laughing, I didn't hear the joke.
I asked about the funding source. They didn't say that. They just said we have it somewhere, so.
The mayor's office has the money.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend to the mayor's office to enter into contract with Mr. Coombs and his team, the University of Louisville, about the issue that we've been discussing. And we've got a motion from Ms. Jung and a second from Mr. Piagentini. Any further comments? All right, let's call roll.
Mary Ann Butler,
Can I pass right now?
David James,
Yes.
Anthony Piagentini. Yes. Ja'Cory Arthur,
Yes.
Julie Rocky Adams, Mike Nemes.
Sorry. Yes.
Sorry. Gerald Neal, Jason Nemes,
Yes.
Ken Fleming,
Yes.
Pamela Stevenson,
Pass.
Bonnie Jung,
Yes.
Sean
Driesbach.
Thank you. Earl Jones. Yes. Scott Schoenberger,
Yes.
Shelby Somerville,
Yes.
Present.
Is there, Ms. Stevenson, you passed, would you like to remain a pass, or would you like to vote? And if you do vote, I think the law requires you to turn your video on. I should have mentioned that up front.
No, thank you. I pass. I haven't seen the documents in front of you, so pass.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you have 10 yeses, 1 present, and 1 pass.
Thank you. A sufficient number having approved of the motion passes. Okay, the only other business we have before us is for me to remind everyone, to let us know which committee you'd like to be assigned to. We have 3 committees. I think a document has been handed out, and Representative Stevenson will be emailed to everyone again, so you'll have that. A document has been handed out, and on the first page, under number 2, there are 3 bullet points. The first word in the first bullet point is gaps, the second one is tax, and the third one is issues. So those are the jurisdiction of the 3 committees. We're going to ask everyone to respond to an email that will be sent out just putting in order. So Councilman Arthur, if your order is, I want to do issues number 1, gaps number 2, and tax number 3, put them in that order. Everyone do the same. And then co-chair and I will meet And hopefully, there's 5 people that have one on this one, 5 on that, and so forth, and we'll make the committees to be presented at the next meeting. Other than that, there's no business to take care of. Anyone have any comments? We're adjourned. No motion on adjournment. Chair's discretion.